It's a pleasure for Dustin and myself to be here with you this afternoon, evening, maybe even morning for some of you. I'm not sure. But happy Friday. As Mina said, my name's Nayiri Keshishi, and I'm a senior lecturer in social sciences at the University of Surrey in the United Kingdom. And I'm also program lead for the Social Sciences Foundation year. And I'm here with my brilliant colleague Dustin, who will introduce himself now.
Thank you very much, Nayiri. And yes, I'm Dustin Hosseini. I'm a lecturer in health science at Cumbria University, and I also am associate tutor at the University of Glasgow, and I study a doctorate in education at the University of Strathclyde. And I'm joining in from Glasgow. I'm in Scotland. And Nayiri, I think you're in London today, right?
I'm in London today, yes. So let's tell you a little bit more about our session and what the next 45 minutes is going to look like. We're going to have a look at how AI can show unfairness in race and gender in particular. And you're going to develop skills to question and potentially help fix how AI can generate unjust stereotypes. You'll also develop your awareness of biases in generative AI. And then as part of that discussion, well, we'll have discussion throughout and we'll have a feedback session as well for us to talk about this topic and also for you to ask any questions. We thought we'd also highlight that even though this session focuses on AI generated images, the same could be said for results that you may find in stock image websites like Google Images or Pixabay using certain keywords. So today we'll focus on AI generated images, but it's important to remember that some of the issues that we face in terms of stereotyping and the results that are generated, the same can apply to stock images. I'll pass over to Dustin now.
Thank you, Nayiri. And just to kind of give you a preview, these are just some images that I created today using ChatGPT, the premium version. And as you can see, for these images, they all look aesthetically pleasing. They all look kind of realistic. But as we will see later in the session, some of the images, all of the images have biases and they represent perhaps maybe unjust ways of representation of people. Just for your reference, I see people from different countries, so Nigeria, Czech Republic. Feel free to say where you're from because we don't really know where all of you are from, in Germany as well. These images are supposedly, an image of a Moroccan grandmother, an image of a Ghanaian grandmother uh, making jollof rice, I think, and an image of an American grandmother making pancakes. So this is just a preview to kind of show you what we're going to talk about later.
So, to give you an introduction on this topic and AI generally, machine learning helps AI get smarter by learning from data. So the data that we input into AI, that's what AI learns from. However, this data that is inputted, it does reflect human biases, and this can include biases like racial or economic inequalities. And at the moment, because of all the work around AI and its increased use, researchers are studying why AI can erase or hide certain groups and focus on more dominant ones. So there's a lot of research on this at the moment. However, what we do know is that the data impacts what AI puts out, and that data in itself contains biases. So, why is this topic important? Well, our world is and will be increasingly shaped by AI, so its use is only going to increase. And therefore, our understanding of it, its ethical dimensions, especially when it comes to such big topics like race and gender, is really important. So, through experimentation, analysis, and collaboration, these are the key ways that we're going to uncover and address any issues that might come up. So on the slide, you can see some common generative AI tools. Some of these you might be familiar with already, so it'd be interesting to hear in the chat if you are aware of some of these. Um, ChatGPT is arguably the most well known, and all of these websites, or most of these websites, they will generate different things. So it might be text to text, it might be text to image. And Dustin will tell you a bit more now about how he used DALL-E and some of the other generative AI tools that can be used.
So we focus on DALL-E, which is one of a few of the image generation tools. If you know of any other image generation tools, please drop them in the chat because I've only experimented with DALL-E. But we chose DALL-E because it's pretty widespread. In the UK, for example, universities have access to something called Microsoft Copilot, and they can access DALL-E through Copilot to make images for education. We also chose DALL-E and images because media and image bias can affect how we view the world. So as you can see in this image here, what the television, what media shows us may not be the full story. There may be something that is being hidden, erased, obscured, manipulated, so on and so forth. Similarly, the images that DALL-E creates can be harmful and maybe not representative of people in general, as we'll see. So what we focus on is race and ethnicity, and these are ideas that people have created, they're socially constructed, and these two ideas are often ideas that overlap, right? So what we'll do is we'll use these definitions to help us understand and analyze these topics. These are from Fitzgerald, 2020. Race is a group of people that share some socially defined characteristics. For example, skin color, hair texture, facial features, and so on. Ethnicity, on the other hand, is the culture, nationality, ancestry, or language shared by a group of people, irrespective of their physical appearance. Now, these are just two examples. It doesn't mean that there are other slightly different definitions, but we're using these for our session. So another definition which we are using of race is the idea that it's a dividing line. It's something that divides us, that cuts across multiple power relations. So how race defines us also takes into account class, sexuality, sexual nature, gender on a global scale. So what this means is that race and racism are built into systems and structures, whether it's universities, government, business, so on and so forth, that create high power hierarchies. And these inequalities are made worse by factors like gender, sex, and class, and so on. And just some background, how did we come to doing this? The last couple of years, I decided to experiment with generative AI because I was curious, I like technology. I then wrote a blog and I put it out to the world. And as a result, Nayiri.
And as a result, I contacted Dustin because I thought that the blog was, first of all, really interesting and it would be a really good workshop, allowing people to develop their critical thinking skills, particularly when it comes to images and images that AI is able to produce. So we worked together to put together a workshop, and we created some materials to go alongside that workshop as well. Um, as Dustin has already mentioned, the experimentation with DALL-E, so putting in text and then an image coming out or being created, was what we did. And we chose a fairly innocent prompt, which Dustin will tell you more about now. But from this experiment, we understood that even these innocent prompts, they can create quite harmful or stereotypical results.
So the prompt that we used was create an image of a sweet old ex-grandmother making pancakes. So where X means a nationality objective. And we'll show you some examples in a moment. But why we did this, I think it's on the next slide, maybe. Why we did this, we were curious. We thought it was going to be a, innocent prompt, because even an innocent prompt, as we will show you rather, can create kind of harmful results. Simple things like We like pancakes. Of course, pancakes are not international. They're common in some cultures, but not in other cultures. Grandmothers usually play a significant role in many cultures, such as Russia, where they're a major symbol and source of unpaid labor, but probably in many countries, right? But also because they're kind of a symbol that represents an intersection of age, gender, and class as well.
It's important to remember that we we're using language that might seem harmless. So in our prompts, we put sweet old grandmother. However, we need to acknowledge that this kind of language can be unfair or unjust. Now, when we use this kind of language that is unfair or unjust, we are often making assumptions without knowing people for who they are. So, for example, not all grandmothers are old, but we are including that in our description. So we need to acknowledge that. Not all older women are grandmothers. And words like sweet or old can stereotype people and ignore their individuality. It's important that we remember this, not only for the context of this session, but also generally when we're thinking about the kinds of adjectives that we're using to describe certain groups of people.
And so just for context, the images that you'll see, we created some of the original ones in July 2023, and then later in February 2024. It's important to understand when, because as you will see, the technology has progressed, it's developed, it's changing, it's getting better at visual representations. So here are some of the images that we have, first of all. And what we'd like you to do is to consider some questions. And I'll put these questions in the chat. There's the first question. How would you describe the atmosphere, the clothing, the decorations, the decor of these avatars? And, you know, avatars, by avatars, we mean like people, but computer generated people. And what does this say about the avatars?
At this stage, it's just about you looking at the images and describing what you're seeing. What is it that stands out to you? What is something that might seem odd or not so odd? Something that you can resonate with, or perhaps you've seen in your experiences. So what is it that you can see in these two sets of images?
So all of them are cooking, baking, yes, because the question I asked was, you know, make an image of a sweet old Russian grandmother making pancakes. Harim says simple clothing. Most have an apron on. Yes, most do have kind of an apron on. It looks like they prefer modesty. They live in kind of warm, comfortable homes, perhaps, yeah. They're dressed in traditional Russian attire. Is it traditional though? Are you sure? How do you know it's traditional? One of the pictures doesn't feel warm and comfortable. She's out in the snow.
There's some interesting observations coming through in terms of the environment, what they're wearing. So the next question now is, what do these representations tell us? How can we link our analysis with representations? One of them doesn't look happy making the pancakes yet. I think you could argue that more than one of them doesn't look particularly happy as they're making them. But some of these things you've described, some of these representations, what might they be telling us? Or what are they not telling us?
And what would be good is in your own time, this is your homework task if you wish, go experiment, try it for a different nationality. Polish, Ukrainian, for example, and then compare and see how similar or different they are. Or are they even representative? Okay. I see some of the names in the chat. And just so you know, I lived in Moscow for a few years, so I speak Russian as well. Yeah, I got a little surprise there. So I see, but yeah, this is where my understanding is this is not like real people. This is fairy tales. This is what you might see in a fairy tale story, right? Let's go to the next set of images. Okay, these are American grandmothers. Again, I asked ChatGPT and DALL-E to make a prompt saying, what is it? Create an image of a sweet old American grandmother making pancakes. So look at these images again and tell us, what do you think? Okay, Aisha, yeah, a more modern setting compared to the previous ones. Yeah,
So the images on the slide now, these are all from the same prompt to
yeah.
create American grandmothers. However, the set of four images on the left of your screen were created in
Ah,
2023, and on the right, they were created in 2024. So you can see there are slight improvements in terms of how they look aesthetically,
yeah.
but
So
there are still some issues as well.
exactly. So Eleni, the images, like Nayiri said, the images on the left, those are from the summer of 2023. The images on the right are from February 2024. So a year ago, actually. So you see, the new images, they look nicer, but they're still problematic. Yes, Azibek, grandmothers, they're always making pancakes. Yeah. Because that was my prompt. Okay. Now, what do you think about the facial expressions? If you look at the faces, what does that tell you if you analyze that? Yes, the generative AI doesn't do well with like hands and eyes. Yeah, some of them are happy, some of them aren't. But compared to the previous slides, these ones, they're a little bit happier if you think about it. And also, if you look at their eyes, they're usually looking at the camera, whereas the previous images, they were looking away from the camera. Yeah, most of the grandmothers are facially better than others. Okay, what Kristen said is interesting because, again, if you're saying these look better, the reasoning could be that the system is biased. So the images that were created for the others, the ones we saw before, were created in more of a fantastic way, a fantasy way, whereas these look more like photographs. Okay, they look healthy. Basik, what do you mean they look healthy? Tell us what that means. What does healthy mean to you? Okay, why don't we go now to the next set of slides? Now, I'll go ahead and tell you what the problem is with these. The first problem was when I entered the prompt, create an image of a sweet old American grandmother, they were all white, right? None of them were black or brown or whatever. They were all white. So I had to actually tell ChatGPT uh, and DALL-E to create an image of a sweet old black American grandmother. So I had to be specific. Now, you can say, yes, we have to be specific because it's generative AI. It doesn't know better. But all of these images, especially the images on the left, they are very problematic. The women, they look bigger. They look maybe less healthy, less attractive. And the images on the left, again, it looks like maybe they're not grandmothers, but maybe they are working, right? Does that make sense? Some of them wearing cultural clothes, perhaps, but if they are American, shouldn't they look like, in terms of dress, similar to white Americans, right? Because the dress isn't that, I guess, isn't that different across the US. Women do dress differently, of course. They have different hairstyles, but maybe not so radically. Yeah, what Naomi said, the ones on the left look like they're in poor conditions. Yeah, I would say that too. The ones on the left as well, the kitchens, they look utilitarian. The kitchens look like a kitchen where you go only to cook, like in a restaurant or in a poor condition, if you can say that. The ones on the right, totally different. But again, it's this is where we have to understand, well, why are the images on the left like this? Why are the images on the right like that? Also, the images on the left, the women, the avatars, they look like, again, they could be working or they're cleaners, right? They don't look like just a simple grandmother in her house making food, I think. Yeah, what Kristen said, the pictures on the left look gloomy, unlike the white American grandmothers. Agreed. There are some other things which I will go ahead and share just now before we look at the next set of slides. Um, the images on the left, actually, the way the women are represented, the Black American women, it's actually racist. And this is rooted in history, and you can read about it separately. I'll give you a link in the chat. There's a whole history of this, which is quite sad, but we don't have too much time to go into it today. It's a particular type of culture called mammy culture.
So this is just a zoomed in slide of some of the images you saw on the previous slide. And if we go to the next slide, we've got some more examples. So as Dustin mentioned earlier, we'd really encourage you for your homework or post-session activity to have a go at creating your own images, maybe from your own race or ethnicity or country that you live in or a place that you want to visit. See what it brings up. This is what's happened in 2024 on Dali when we use the same prompts but for Chinese grandmothers. So again, please share in the chat. What are some things that you're seeing here? What could be argued as being stereotypical? What is problematic? What are some of the things that you're seeing? Can you relate to any of them? Or do you not relate? So what are some things that you're seeing in these images? As I said, both of these images were created in 2024, so you could argue that they are aesthetically more pleasing than the older versions in 2023. But what else is it that you're seeing? One looks a little bit younger than the other. Okay, yeah. They have makeup on, look like they're living in better conditions. Okay. In comparison to which one? Are you comparing to the Russian grandmothers, for example? Perhaps their smiles are forced. Yeah, maybe. What about the backgrounds, the kitchens themselves, the kind of tools they're using, the traditional background of known Chinese household? Potentially, but how do we know that? Is
Yeah.
that based on our own assumptions and stereotypes that we have? Decor seems stereotypical to me. Okay, Ketty, that's an interesting observation. What is it in particular that seems stereotypical? Azizbek, you make a good an interesting point. They have no obesity problems, unlike ones we have seen previously. So then my question back to you, and this is a good discussion. Yes, in this image, they uh are not large in terms of their size, but how do you know there are no obesity problems in China? Have you heard about that from somewhere? Is that fact? Or is it just based on these assumptions and stereotypes that we have about that country? But you're right, in this image, that isn't represented, but it doesn't mean that there isn't an issue in that country.
Yeah, and actually, the problem with these images is that in China, people don't have lanterns like this in their houses. You might find this in a garden, or something, maybe a restaurant, but you wouldn't find these in the houses. And I don't know if you know, you see a flower there. That flower is an orchid. Again, very stereotypical. You won't necessarily find this. Now, another problem with this image, of course, is pancakes are not really eaten in China. Okay. Of course, I did ask ChatGPT to make a specific prompt. So that's why they have made these pancakes. Other than that, other issues, I suppose, with the image is the women, the avatar women, they have similar facial features. There's no diversity. So they're not bigger or smaller. They're quite slim, I guess, if you think about that. Now, I'm going to share in the chat some other examples, which hopefully you can see. I made an image of a sweet old Ukrainian grandmother making pancakes. And also because I see we have some Georgian people in the room, a Georgian mother. Have a look at that chat just now, if you can, and see what you think. What do you think about the images that ChatGPT has created? And by the way, these I've just created these today, so they're not old, they were made today. Can everyone access that link that I've just sent to you? Okay. In any case, can everyone have a look at that link that I put in the chat? What do you think about the last two prompts? So one is about a Ukrainian grandmother, one is about a Georgian grandmother. And at the very beginning, you can see a Ghanaian grandmother as well. Tell us what you think about these images. You say traditional clothes, but does that mean that people wear those today? Ah, okay, it's stereotypical. Right. Okay. What about the other image?
So for those of you that were having trouble accessing the link, um, here is the image using the prompt sweet elderly American grandmother making pancakes. So you can see that image here. And then using the same prompt, you have Ukrainian grandmother. And then this is the Georgian grandmother. So again, some of these things in the images might be quite familiar to you. Some of them might not. They might seem quite stereotypical. It depends on where you're from and what you've seen, what your assumptions might be about a particular race or ethnicity or country.
So, okay, Patrice was asking, how do we solve this? Well, one way is to understand that AI tools, they often reflect the biases and stereotypes from the data that they are trained on. So whatever you input, whatever the AI tools are used, whatever data they are used, that is used to train them, they will then replicate that. They will spit that out as well. What this means is that historically, groups that have been in power, like colonizers, have these advantages, while others who were like colonized who were previously enslaved, they have ongoing kind of challenges. So what that means for data and AI is that those who were in power 50 years ago, 100 years ago, they're still affecting the data. It's maybe unbelievable, but it's true. Because they wrote the histories, they took the images, they created these systems which are still being used, and then we see that in generative AI. This is what's called coloniality, when power and knowledge favor dominant groups. So AI or generative AI unintentionally or probably intentionally also does the same thing, right? It favors white people over racialized groups like Black and Asian communities or others, okay? And of course, this makes inequalities worse. So how do we fix this? Well, what we have to do is we have to experiment with these tools to understand what are they making, why are they making it that way? Yeah. I think on Wednesday or Tuesday, you had a session about AI and ethics, and they talked about algorithmic bias. So you need to understand what is algorithmic bias, how does it happen, where does it happen, why does it happen? Okay. Another thing is we have to bring together kind of people from all different backgrounds to challenge these things together. In other words, we have to work together to kind of challenge this. It will not be an easy answer of you report it to the AI company and they will change something for you, right? It has to be a large collective concerted effort. Some people who talk about governance, ethics, they would say that we need to develop local and national rules to ensure that AI systems are fair. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, experimentation and teaching people how to understand and use these generative AI tools and also why do they make these kind of results is also another thing. So experimentation, reflection, and so on and so forth. It'll be a cyclical process, an endless cycle of kind of experimentation and reflection. And yeah, what I've just more or less said is, again, we have to experiment. It's only through experimentation that we begin to understand how and why these tools make these images. Now, a bigger solution might be to understand that it's great to study mathematics, statistics, engineering, math, whatever, sciences, but it's also equally important that you understand social sciences, humanities, and other subjects, because these subjects will help you to interrogate why does this happen the way it does, right? That's the importance of learning those other topics. That's what this session was all about, is looking at the images and then saying why. Why does it look the way it does? Is it true? Is it false? If it's false, why is it false? And then, of course, if it's false, why does it look false in the first place? What is the data that's training these tools, to be like this? So again, to answer Patrice's question, a collective and concentrated effort to address these things is how we have to do it. So working together. It won't be easy, right? Because there's a lot of data out there, which is problematic. What questions might you have? I know that hasn't been a very easy session.
And now we're going to move to our questions from our participants. Are there any apps that check the app digital tool you create to make sure it doesn't include any biases and include all AI ethics?
No, I don't think so. Are there any apps to check the digital tool? No, there's not, because it's a new area. It's a very new area that people are just beginning to understand. If you're really interested in reading about this area, to better understand it, and you have access to a library, or if you want to spend money and buy a book or find the book online, a really good book is this one. It's A Race After Technology. Benjamin Ruha, they talk about how this all works together, how these systems and structures make these things in the online digital space. So Patrice, unfortunately, there's no tool like that. Maybe you can make it. It would be a very big effort, but it's probably a needed effort to be done.
Thank you so much for your answer. And I'm moving to the next question. Who should be held accountable when AI systems produce biased or harmful outputs? Developers, companies, or users? How can accountability mechanisms be built into AI development process?
Very, very good question. In short, everyone needs to hold everybody accountable. I think there are things that we can do as users in terms of how we use AI, how we develop our awareness, and how we use images to make sure that everyone is represented within that group that we're trying to represent, or whatever the image is trying to show. But remember, this isn't a problem just with AI. As we mentioned at the start, stock images have the same issue, and all of the data that AI uses, it's data that had already existed and has been there for a very long time. So these biases aren't anything new. So we need to think about how we can input more up-to-date data that is fairer and make sure that everyone is represented, and tries to diminish stereotypes as much as possible. So that will be would be my answer. I don't know, Dustin, if you have anything to add.
Well, as we know, things like ChatGPT, for example, they have a feedback button, which is like a thumbs up or thumbs down. That's one way to do that. Of course, the problem with that is you are improving this product because it is a product for free. So, and if you're paying for it, you're also paying for the product and then you're giving them feedback for free. So in this sense, yes, it's up to the users, but of course, it's also up to the people who develop these tools. And then I would say as well, advocacy groups. So advocacy groups, human rights groups, this is also going to be human rights, civil rights groups coming together and interrogating these kind of tools to see what are they doing. Again, I'll refer back to Ruha Benjamin's work. It's a good book that goes into some of these questions. And there will be others as well. She's only one of a few other people who is researching this area.
How does AI users know that the data they input is biased or unbiased because they can unknowingly input biased data?
This is where you have to become a critical thinker about what are you doing? What is the information that you have? How do you know it's true? And this is where it can become more of a philosophical kind of argument, right? 1 + 1 is 2, yes? But you might have somebody over here, Donald Trump, he says 1 + 1 is 4. We know that's not true. So it's about interrogating who is saying these things, what is their position of power from this data that you're reading, and then seeing, okay, what is the probability that this could be correct or incorrect? Nayiri, you want to go on before I keep bashing Trump?
Look, we all have our unconscious biases. So without knowing, there are certain biases we have, and that comes from various things, the media we consume, the people we speak to. So the data that we input will naturally have some unconscious bias, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just human nature. What we're trying to do through this workshop is to get you actually thinking about the output. So it's one thing what you input into AI, and of course, there are things you can do to help minimize bias, but it's about understanding what the output is. Are there any potential issues with it? Are there things that you need to recreate or change to make sure that the image represents exactly what you want it to represent? So before you put it anywhere, before you share it on a presentation or put it on a website, these are the kinds of questions we want you to think about. So I think it's important to remember, one, we all have our unconscious biases. So those are naturally there. You know, as humans, we have that. Um, but just making sure that the output that comes from AI is what you are truly trying to represent.
Thank you so much for your answer. If there were something like a punishment for those who are accountable, what would it be?
Oh, a punishment. I mean, as was mentioned earlier, in terms of our possible solutions, you know, countries are already looking at AI laws and policies to put in place to make sure it's responsible use. So perhaps through those laws, we could think about potential punishments, or maybe we think of incentives or things that would encourage these big companies to actually think about the data that they are using to train the AI tools. That's one way. Um, there might be some other ways that you can think of as well, but you know, it has to be an effort from everyone. It's not just one person that can solve this issue. It's a huge issue, so we have to all work together to do that. But I think laws and policies are a way to work towards it for sure.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I would like to ask, when we were discussing about the images, we've seen how the tradition plays a part, or the stereotypical tradition plays a part. But when it comes to religion and mixed religious countries, what type of images is being created by AI?
Okay, that's a good question. So the images that were created usually represented the dominant people in that country. So, for example, the prompt about American grandmothers created an image of white grandmothers. There were no black or brown or Asian grandmothers, for example. The same for Russia. Uh, there were only white Russians, so ethnically Russian, kind of. What this means is that if you were Kazakh or Uzbek or Tatar, anyone else, you were not represented in the images. So that's where it becomes very problematic, especially in very, very diverse countries like the US, um, India, China, Brazil, even. Brazil is not totally a white country, it's actually a black majority country, from what I understand, right? But a lot of representations of Brazilians are usually white, they're not always non-white.
Thank you for highlighting that and your answer. Another question from our audience: why is AI important for modern apps?
I think the answer is complex, but the simple answer is it helps to make some of our lives easier. If you think about Microsoft Word, a lot of us who use Microsoft Word or even Google Docs, we probably have used spell check. That's the basic form of AI in an app. It's low level, but it's designed to help the user to become better at the surface things, the superficial things, so that they can get their message across. So if you think about it as, again, a low level, that's how AI can be important for modern apps, making the user's experience easier so that they can focus on the bigger task and not the small, small details. But some people like to focus on the small, small details.
How can educational institutions better prepare students to engage with AI technologies critically and ethically, particularly in fields where AI is increasingly influential?
Um, I think that universities should work directly with students because students are the future. They should not focus on policy alone. So they should make policy, if anything, with students, but also make experimentation with students as well. The problem is you have a lot of older lecturers who might not be comfortable with technology, but this is where you can teach a more experienced academic how to use these tools. The students can if they're experimenting with it. So this means we would need humility on both sides, from the academic sides, but also from the students. Because for a student, if you're young, you think, oh, how am I going to teach an older, more experienced person something? You can, yeah? You can always teach someone something. Nayiri, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think universities have a role, but students can teach us, as in lecturers, just as much in universities as lecturers can teach them. So there's definitely work that needs to be done in terms of how to use AI ethically, making sure you analyze the output, don't just take things at face value. But these are things universities have been trying to do for years, not just with AI, but any material, whether it's a journal article, a book, a website, a blog, a YouTube video that you're watching. That critical analysis and not just taking someone's word for it because they say they're an expert in whatever topic. This is what universities have been trying to do since they began. And the same principles apply to AI. So I think there's learning from both sides. But that critical analysis isn't anything new. Universities have been doing that. And that's one of their main purposes, I believe, anyway.
Agreed.
Thank you so much for your answers. We were so happy to have you, both of you, Dustin and Nayiri, for your sharing your insights. It's end of our session, so thank you. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye, everybody. Have a good weekend.
For being part of this incredible bootcamp journey. We're so happy for our speakers and our participants for their contribution. Over the past days, we've explored AI's potential challenges and ethical considerations, and we hope you leave feeling inspired and empowered to create a more inclusive AI future. This may be the end of Bootcamp week, but it's just the beginning of our AI journey. Stay connected, keep questioning, and continue pushing the innovation that serves everyone. Additionally, I would like to thank Sage Foundation, and Red Hat for sponsoring this session and connecting us with our speakers. As we come to the end of our event, I encourage you to stay connected and continue exploring the exciting realms of machine learning and artificial intelligence. If you have further inquiries or if there's anything you would like to discuss, feel free to reach out. Wishing you all a wonderful day ahead, and until we meet again in our future events, take care and stay curious. Goodbye, everyone.